that ministers of state will have to justify the inclusion on a yearly basis on whether to be reinstated by the president effective 2013.
What you submit to what you present, more or less, is something that will be used to assess your performance. So based on what you have been able to present, but it should be tailored towards achieving the vision of His Excellency the President.
And today we're asking, is this practicable? Welcome to today's big story. My name is Bright Nanamfo. Now, it is 6 months down the line since the senior policy coordinator, Sule Gariba, announced that ministers will be internally assessed by the president and his monitoring team on the programs and policies for their various ministries. Today, government has again announced that it has kick-started a monitoring and evaluation program for ministers and government appointees, with the first set of ministers defending their strategies at the presidency. Deputy Information and Media Relations Minister Murtala Ibrahim Mohammed told journalists that the ministers were made to provide timelines on the achievement of their goals. According to him, all ministers and appointees will be taken through the process every year.
It started almost a month now that the ministers have. In fact, the drawings and everything, the strategy through which the presentation was going to be done was fashioned out not today, but they started. I am not too sure how many ministries. I have the information here. Maybe I wouldn't want to. But those who have done the presentation, you know, have at least about 2 or about 4 ministries have done that. They have done their presentation. And the presentation is light. You have to indicate to His Excellency the President sometimes the challenges, the strength, how you are going to overcome the challenges. You know, it's like a swap analysis of what you are going to do at that ministry. And that is basically what each of the ministers have done. And the other ministries would continue. Almost all ministries are going to do that. There are questions, it's like an internal APRM, you know, where there are some criticisms that are made about some of the strategies to achieve those objectives. And if you present and they think that you need to fashion out certain things, the criticisms will tell you what you need to do as a minister. What you submit to what you present, more or less, is something that will be used to assess your performance. So based on what you have been able to present, but it should be tailored towards achieving the vision of His Excellency the President.
And of course, that is the issue for today's big story. And the Deputy Minister of Information and Media Relations, Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed, has just joined me on the line. Great to have you, sir, on today's big story. But first of all, let me find out, how effective is this in ensuring that ministers and government appointees do their work the way we want them to do?
I think that, first and foremost, good evening to your listeners. They do the work the way His Excellency the President wants them to do.
Right.
I think that His Excellency the President, as a candidate in the 2012 election, presented to the good people of this country a manifesto and a vision that he would want to take this country towards in the next 4 years.
Right.
Upon the manifesto that was submitted for the good people of this country to consider, giving him the opportunity to do so, Ghanaians voted him as the President. What the ministers are expected to do is that there is already a larger policy direction of the government. It is also clear that each ministry would have a different path through which they can charter that particular policy direction. Because clearly, the work of a Minister of Education wouldn't be the same as Minister of Energy or Minister of Agri.
Right.
They would all have one thing, different things to do, but tailored towards achieving what the people of this country were promised in the NDC manifesto. So what happens is that each ministry has the opportunity to submit to His Excellency the President and a team of experts the strategies that the ministry would use in achieving that particular objective. You would have to come out with a plan of implementation as to what you intend to do, the steps that you are going to take. In fact, the timeline that you are going to achieve this, the objective set, how those objectives or targets can be achieved the procedure or processes through which you can achieve those targets. Now, when the ministers come to do this presentation, they do the presentation in the presence of His Excellency the President and some of the experts who are brought in. In fact, some of the experts who are brought in are not necessarily politicians. They are experts in their own right. They bring them in. Some criticisms are done about how the strategies are going to be adopted by that particular ministry. They fashion out, and that becomes, if you like, the benchmark to determine whether you have been able to achieve that or not. This thing is going to be assessed by the policy, if you like, bureau of the presidency, and you know that this thing is handled by Dr. Sule Garba.
Right.
These things are handled by Dr. Sule Garba, and there's a team. He's not working alone. He works with a team. They would assess it, and all the targets, the benchmarks that he set, how you're going to achieve them, the timeline, everything would be used to assess you as the minister and how you have been able to perform within the period that you are administering a particular minister. And it is going to be done possibly yearly, so that at the end of the year they assess you and see whether you have been able to. So everybody, the position you hold, to a very large extent is determined by your performance.
Right. Let me quickly chip in this. Now, I'm sure you agree with me that there are tons and tons of recommendations perhaps lying all about in our ministries, departments, and even the presidency, that recommendations have been made for certain issues to be sorted out. Sometimes these recommendations do not really get the kind of attention it needs. What is different this time?
Yeah, that was the reason why His Excellency the President said that. You remember in his inaugural address to Parliament, he said that it is not going to be business as usual, and that is why he said that each government appointee, the minister or ministers, are going to be assessed based on performance, and that they are going to have a contract with His Excellency the President, so that if you are not able to perform, that is why the benchmarks are determined by the minister.
Hello, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Right. Thanks so much. I lost you momentarily. But again, let's then come back and talk about the timelines you earlier spoke about. What timelines are we looking at here?
A timeline that would determine how you're going to implement, or the strategies that you are using to implement, if you like, the plan that you have, implement the policies of the government. But let me also state that the policies are also to a very large extent determined by the budgetary allocation that government wouldn't expect you to do something that is not captured in the budget, because certainly every policy that is going to be implemented, whether critical or not, would involve some resources. And if it is not indeed taken care of in the budget that was submitted and approved by Parliament, government wouldn't be expecting that you should be able to achieve that, because it therefore means that you have to look for resources somewhere. That is not what government is looking at. The presentation, indeed, is clearly indicating that this is what we have. This is the policy direction. This is what the ministry is supposed to do. This is what we intend to do. In fact, in some of the presentations, they are also expected to tell government that, look, these are the constraints, these are the challenges that we face, and we think that these are the possible resources that we can get to overcome these challenges. All these things are flashing out.
You said the team is headed by Dr. Sule Garba, the president.
No, I'm saying that he is in charge of policy. It's a team. In fact, the whole team that's made up of experts.
Right.
Not necessarily policy.
Do you know the background of these experts, and would the presidency consider putting a member of the opposition party on this team? And if it were, why? And if not, why?
Maybe the simple question is that whether a member of opposition will agree to the vision of His Excellency the President. I told you that everything any ministry does with regard to the implementation of policy direction must reflect the vision of His Excellency the President.
Right.
I really don't think that members of opposition indeed will agree with the vision. In this country, even those who make statements that is suggestive of the fact that the president is doing well, particularly within MPP,
right.
we are all aware how they were treated.
Can you please hold on for me? Let me speak to a member of one of the civil societies in Ghana, Imani. He is the communications director, Salom Brantier, just joined this discussion. Now, Salom, great to have you joined us. And now, what do you think about all this? The presidency is putting together a team to evaluate and monitor government appointees and ministers. The basic thing here is to ensure efficiency and effectiveness. Is this really what can get government appointees and ministers working?
Yeah, good evening and thank you for coming on the program. First of all, the idea in itself sounds like a good idea that the government should develop a mechanism by which to benchmark certain performance aspects of its ministers.
Right.
And in the quest for possibly good governance and all those other ideal attributes, it sounds like a very good idea. However, in examining some of these things, we would really need to look at it as to the kind of the composition of the body that we are talking about, and whether it is not even duplicating other functions or other areas of government that already exist. In looking at something like this, for instance, how are you going to develop it to make it a very, very neutral kind of setup if you, for example, have the same members of the party or the same members of government trying to evaluate each other based on certain parameters, because it would kind of be it's not going to serve the best interest if the composition of the committee is in that kind of order, because then while somebody is trying to police his friend, he would there will always be to cause divisions amongst the same governing body, and it will not augur well in terms of the overall objectives. In a situation like this, I would rather think that there are enough mechanisms in the country in terms of the activities of the civil service, civil society organizations, and all the others, and also even in the legal setup of the country. For instance, there are ways in which we can observe and monitor excesses or inefficiencies in the system through existing procedures. As to whether this new committee is going to be one of those other new committees that are monetized and don't do anything, come up without any reports at the end of the day, it's yet to be seen, because I have not, or we as Imani have not been satisfied with all these new committees that have been set up, each one purporting to do one function or the other, but always ending up being a moribund institute. And I think that this is one of this kind of trend or this kind of pattern should stop, where a committee is set up for everything, when there are other bodies which are easily capable of handling some of these functions.
I'm not cutting in rudely. Sorry if I have, but I'm not cutting in rudely. But what do you think? Government perhaps is struggling to find a way to monitor its appointees and evaluate the way they work. What do you think government should go? Which is the direction?
The best way is to engage more with civil society organizations. It doesn't need to be money. It doesn't need to be one. It needs to be a consortium probably of all of them, as well as those other stakeholders who are involved in the development process. For instance, the donor partners and all that. If you want to have a fair idea of how some of these things are handled, you should not do it from the inside, but you should do it from the outside. A neutral group, multi-stakeholder setup is the best group that can actually come up with a fair and cogent evaluation of any kind of policy directives that are initiated, because then they would be able to tell the truth right in the face as to without fear or favor, and that is what we need. Because if they really want to evaluate and establish certain efficiencies, it is important that they listen more to civil society and react to what they say in terms of not looking at it as a criticism, but as a constructive way of improving governance in the country.
Right. Salam, don't go away. Let me get back to Mr. Murtala Mohammed there. Murtala, if you are there, now civil society, I just spoke to one of them, thinks that the composition of the team might defeat the very purpose it was set up. How do you react to that?
I really don't know what he's talking about. It's not about, listen, first and foremost, it is not about assessment. I indicated that the NDC won the elections based on a manifesto that was submitted. And the people are going to assess the government based on its ability to achieve the promises that he made. You don't need a civil society group to assess government and see whether indeed they have been able to achieve those things at the end of the 8 years.
They don't. Are you saying they don't matter at all? Is that what you're saying? They don't matter at all?
I'm not saying they don't matter, except that the gentleman is doubting the credibility of those who are. It's not even a committee in the first place. It's not a committee. There is a full department, if you like, for policy and monitoring. Headed by Dr. Sule Garba, and he's not working in isolation. You don't need civil society. Maybe possibly they wanted Imani to be invited. That is not the responsibility of civil society.
Are you inviting a member of Imani to be part of the team?
It is not the responsibility of a civil society group to be able to determine whether the government has been able to achieve the objectives set and the promises made in the 2012 manifesto. It is not the ability of any civil society group. Now, to jump talking about civil society group, I'm completely at loss. The government indeed won an election based on a manifesto, and some promises were made. Now, the people of this country would assess the government based on its ability to achieve those objectives. And the government thinks that I want to sign a performance contract with my appointees. The committee is not even it's a whole bureau, a department. And it is not going to make criticism, it's going to ensure that the timeline, the implementation of the things that you indicated in your presentation are indeed being fulfilled, so that the government can come out and tell the people that, yes, I promise you A, B, C, D. This is how I've been able to indeed achieve those objectives. To be talking about civil society groups, I don't get it. It doesn't happen anywhere that you get civil society groups to determine to you. Indeed, civil society groups can raise concerns about certain things. But on this issue, to tell me that you need to get, in fact, he raised questions about the composition. It's not any committee in the first.
Right. So let me chip in this. Sorry, I have to rudely cut in again. Let me chip in this. Now, the trust and confidence you have in the team, do you think that the public who voted for the president and shared his dream would have that same trust and confidence in the team to be able to discharge the duties they have been asked to?
There isn't any team, like I said. There is no any team.
Right.
There isn't the people, or there isn't any committee. If you are talking about whether the trust of the people, except that someone is telling me that they doubt, the integrity and the credibility of members of those who are going to agree.
Salom of Imani thinks that the people put together might not do good. Go ahead.
I have stated that they are not even made up of politicians. They are made up of experts. The experts who could be coming from civil society groups. Maybe my brother is questioning because Imani is not represented. I made that statement very clearly, that they are not even only politicians, they are not politicians. These are people who have been selected, who are experts. Experts from any other.
Mr. Mutale Mohammed, if you can still hold on, let me go back to Selam. Now, Selam, Mr. Mutale's argument is that it is not politics. The members are not politicians, experts. Are you worried about the fact that experts have been selected and perhaps Imani was not invited? Are you worried about
No, that is a very low blow, and that is not even part of this argument. For you to even go in that direction, it's a bit. It's skewing. You are skewing this discourse in the way of a bit of pettiness.
Let's stay on the line there.
Even when I was making my submission, I said categorically that it doesn't need to be Emmanuel or anybody else. What I was saying was that it has to have a multi-stakeholder approach. It has to have a multi-stakeholder view where you have people who also have at stake in the government efficiency machinery to contribute to it, because you cannot tell a painter to examine his work and then truthfully tell you that his painting is the best painting of all. No, what I was saying was that, for you to come and say sour grapes here is really below the belt. And that was not the direction in which this argument, discussion was supposed to go. What I was saying is that for it to have a very credible standpoint and a very efficient and across-board results-oriented view, you needed to have a multi-stakeholder approach where things will be seen and examined with a very neutral eye. There was nothing about us not being involved. When I say civil society, Imani is not civil society. We are just but a small component of it. There are so many other groups. There are so many other areas of governance that apply in this particular situation or this particular context.
Right.
So
Salom, thanks so much. Thanks so much. And I think you've made your point. Thanks so much, Salom Brantier. Mr. Mutal Mohammed, don't go away yet. Finally, let me, I want to put Mr. Kwesi Pratt online because he's raised some concerns about the fact that he said things don't seem to be going well. But before I let you go, this laudable idea is being said by Imani, but in the final analysis, where do you think this is sending us in terms of our governance structures and systems?
So is this question to me or to...
Salom is gone off the line. This question goes to you, Mr. Murtala Mohammed.
My point is that if you listen to him, he has a problem with me raising those questions. But he used two words. He talks of credibility. He talks of credibility. One, he said that can be credible. He also talks about the fact that neutrality. What is he talking about? That is why I asked the question whether he's doubting the credibility of those experts who have been selected to do that work, or whether he's doubting the neutrality of those individuals. Yet he turned around and says that it's below the belt. Now, if you don't want it to be seen as a below the belt, then you don't talk about credibility and neutrality. I'm saying that the government was given a mandate, and that mandate was given based on the promises that were made to the people of this country. Government has a responsibility of fulfilling the promises that were made. And in fulfilling that, government says that I have appointed ministers who went through parliamentary vetting, and they have indeed been sworn in as ministers. I want you to achieve ABCD. I'm constituting a team, or if you like, a committee.
All right.
That would monitor the kind of things you do.
Right.
Now that team would determine whether you have been able to do it. You are talking about multi-sectoral.
Right.
You are talking about
Mr. Murtala Mohammed, let me once again ask you to stay on the line. I've just been joined by Mr. Kwesi Pratt. He's raised some issues concerning our way of governance. He thinks that really things are not going on well. Mr. Kwesi Pratt, thanks so much for joining this discussion. But what exactly is the concern about the governance system, or what we're seeing now? What exactly is it about?
Well, I suppose that you are discussing the policy decision to evaluate the performance of ministers periodically.
Exactly.
And to chalk out those who are not performing well.
Exactly.
That decision certainly is a very good one. It's an excellent decision. I think that if ministers are appointed and they do not perform well, they have to be chalked out for others to come and move this nation forward. It is good that this is not going to be based on any arbitrary decisions by the president, but there will be a process of evaluation which would enable the ministers to put forth what they have achieved and what they have not been able to achieve, and the reasons for the state of affairs. So I think it's an excellent decision, a decision worthy of support and promotion.
The concern here is that perhaps those who will be doing the evaluation and the monitoring might turn around to do government's work, be the same persons in government, and would not recommend any drastic changes, even if need be.
How do you come to that conclusion?
Well, for instance, I spoke to a One Civil Society organization, and that said that they're not very sure of who and who will be in the team.
Certainly, it's the president who has to do his evaluation, assisted by his staff. He's the one who appointed them. He gave them the responsibility. It is not for some civil society organization which does not even know what the president's motives were, what his targets were, and so on, to be determining for the president who should be a minister and who should not be a minister.
Right.
Why? If you have agreed to abide by the Constitution, then we should accept the tenets of the Constitution. The responsibility for engaging and firing ministers is that of the president and no other person, no civil society.
You don't think that he was elected by the people, and so at least he must take into consideration the views and opinions of the people? He was elected by the people.
That responsibility is the responsibility of the president. That is not civil society responsibility. It's not the responsibility of any other person. Of course, when an evaluation is being done of the performance of ministers, it will be about the extent to which himself or his ministry has been able to serve the society. You understand? And in that regard, the views of people who live in the society cannot be ignored. But it is not for civil society organizations or for any phantom groups to be deciding for the president who should be a minister and who should not be a minister. Then why do you have a president?
Right. Thanks so much for speaking to us on today's big story, Mr. Kwesi Pratt and Deputy Minister of Information, Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed. If you're on the line, let me say thank you so much for joining us. And of course, what is Ghana saying about this particular directive to have ministers and government appointees monitored and evaluated at the end of every year? Let's listen to Ghana.
The fact of the matter is, when every year they've assessed them, then the president should know the stewardship, how they should arrange their things properly in this country, because a lot of things have been going on which is not fair. So when they've assessed them, it gives the president opportunity to also see how best they are performing.
If they assess every year, they will get to know that really at the end of every year, people will be expecting them to deliver, and then it will push them to work hard.
If we assess them at the end of the year, when we are assess them, even so, we don't even know what they are doing actually. They do nothing. They are there and they do what they like.
They should be assessed so that you see their performance, as maybe should know it, maybe if they are doing better or if they are doing something wrong, so that they will correct themselves.
If they are being assessed, then we will know what actually they are doing. Because at the end of every year, when we get to know what they are doing, at least we would have the vein to support them in their doings and everything that they do.
Right, so those were views of the public there about the directive today. But let me quickly get here and tell you exactly what it is. Now, the Ghanaian citizen is the most disregarded employer. We do not seem to have the clout to hold elected officials to account. And today on the big story, we wanted to know, well, this initiative, would it be enough to ensure accountability? What criteria should be used and who makes the rules? We also wanted to see who watches over the watchdog. And these are your comments that have come in, and Dachihini Enes says that the pressure group should watch the watchdog. That's from Dachihini Enes. And then also Courage Livingston is saying that it's a good initiative and I encourage the government to use it very well. And he says it will continue, or it will keep the lazy and unperforming ministers in check. You send that about an hour ago. And then John Kumoji has this. He says civil society should watch over the watchdog, but that performance contract should be published so that we all know what exactly they have signed on to carry out. So your comment in there about that directive to get ministers and government appointees some kind of evaluation and monitoring to ensure that they do the right thing. That has been today's big story. It was brought to you by Blue Rose Limited, Shelter for All, and Star Life Assurance. We are back